Hello and welcome back to another ATP Fantasy video. Monte Carlo may be in full swing as the last 16 wrapped up today, but we need to start thinking ahead to Tournament Week 2 for the ATP 500 events in Barcelona and Munich. So in this video we're going to cover the latest ATP Fantasy news, how it impacts you, and most importantly, players to target and players to sell as we head into Tournament Week 2. Let's dive in. So before we dive in and talk all things Barcelona and Munich, I wanted to cover what we've learnt so far. We're now on Thursday, April 9th. We've had a few days since ATP Fantasy launched, and I had some interesting observations that I wanted to share that will also answer some of the questions I've received over the past few days. So first things first, the points do update in real time. Your live scores are tracked in the game. However, your alternates will not sub in until the end of the tournament. A lot of people have messaged me saying that Mensik's still on their team with 10 points, even though he withdrew before his first match. Why hasn't their first alternate come in? Don't worry, they will come into your team. It just won't be until the end of the tournament, I'm afraid. Annoyingly as well, your overall rank and the league standings will not update until the end of the tournament either. I had a few questions on this too. It's a shame. Hopefully at some point the ATP will be able to update the standings day by day. But right now we have to wait until the end of the week to find out where we sit in the world rankings. Player prices are shifting in real time. They are moving daily. There was a huge swing on Monday morning when the points came off for Monte Carlo this week. So on Monday mornings they're going to take off the points for the upcoming tournament. So we need to keep that in mind if we're trying to chase price rises or price falls, because on Monday morning this week, for example, everyone's points will come off from Munich and Barcelona. So Alcaraz's 500 points will come off. Zverev will lose his 500 points, for example. So that's something to be mindful of. I'm going to try and put out a short every Sunday to notify you guys of the major price rises and price falls, so you can catch that before Monday. Something interesting I've noticed here is that first round losses in Monte Carlo and Paris, which are the smaller Master 1000 events that only have 64 player draws, they are still only rewarding you the points for a round 128 loss, which is only 10 points. So we were wondering before whether it would be a good time to play the alternate chip this past week, for example, because technically your alternates would have a higher floor because they're automatically going to be in the round of 64, which should be 30 points. But the ATP obviously flagged that before they launched the game and have baked in the situation where that only counts as a first round loss. This also applies to the seeds as well. Top 8 seeds got to buy straight into the round of 32. But that is not an instant 50 points for being in that round. They only would have got 10 points had they lost. So happened this week that all 8 top seeds won their first match, but had one of them lost, they only would have got 10 points rather than going up to 100 for making the round of 16. So it's quite a jump. That said, when a player does get a win, they'll immediately jump to the round appropriate score. So rather than getting 10 points for losing in the round of 64, if you won and made it to the round of 32, you would then claim your 50 points. It wouldn't be scaled back from there. And the last observation so far is that retirements do not trigger the straight sets win bonus. We've only seen one example so far, but Matteo Berrettini was 4-love up against Roberto Bautista Agut in the first round of Monte Carlo before Bautista Agut withdrew. So originally the app did put those plus 10 points on for Berrettini, but they have since taken them off. The only thing we know for sure is that aces and double faults do count from the match. I would be interested to see, had Berrettini won the first set 6-love and then RBA retired in the second set, would RBA have got the penalty points for losing a 6-love set? I'm hoping the answer would be yes. We'll have to see whether that ever shakes out in a future situation. I'm also curious to see that had RBA been seeded, for example, would Berrettini have got the upset bonus, the plus 20 points, even though it was through retirement? Again, you have to imagine they should implement this. The only one it makes sense to not apply to a retirement would be the straight sets win, because 2 complete sets have not been played. So heading into Tournament Week 2, here are the key things you need to know. You have 2 free switches this week, so a chance to change out 2 of your players for 2 new players. Each additional switch you make will cost you 50 points. It'll be minus 50 points off your total score from this week. And when I say switches, I mean actual transfers in and out for new players, not swapping who's on your alternates into your main squad. That doesn't count. I just mean bringing in brand new players that you do not own. And a reminder that if you decide not to use any of your switches this week, then they will carry over. So you would have 4 for Tournament Week 3. If you used 1, you'd have 3 free switches for Tournament Week 3. The Tournament Week 2 deadline is this coming Monday, April 13th. Again, as I said, ranking points from Barcelona and Munich will come off on Monday morning, so that's pre-deadline. So make sure you're aware of that if you're making last-minute changes. Davidovich Fokina has withdrew from Barcelona. He also missed Monte Carlo as well. And Taylor Fritz is not playing in Munich. He did not play in Monte Carlo either. And Casper Ruud and Jakub Mensik, who we'll come on to later, both very highly owned players, both have injury question marks, especially Casper Ruud, who had to retire from his match today against Felix Auger-Aliassime with a nasty-looking calf injury. He could hardly put any weight on his right leg. It doesn't look great for next week and the rest of the clay court swing in general. Meanwhile, Mensik withdrew before his first match with a toe injury, still looks set to play Munich, but definitely something to keep an eye on. And lastly, hold off on buying Carlos Alcaraz and selling Jannik Sinner because their prices could swap. If Sinner gets the world number 1 ranking this weekend, then he will rise to 40 credits and Alcaraz will go to 36. So you could actually make a profit off of this if you just wait a little bit longer. So let's look ahead to Tournament Week 2 and we'll start with an overview of the 500 event in Barcelona. So I've highlighted these 8 players. I see these as players to watch for this tournament and I group them into 3 different categories. In yellow we have the template picks, those that are over 25% owned in the game. We've got some pivot picks in orange that do have a lot of upside but aren't quite differential level. Differential means that they're owned by less than 10% of players in the game, so there's huge points to gain there. As you can see, Carlos Alcaraz, I would say that he is almost close to being essential this week. Defending champion, 68% ownership now, that's gone up since the Monte Carlo deadline when he was at 66%. I expect it to reach over 70, definitely by Monday's deadline. I calculated the points for everyone for this time last season, if ATP Fantasy existed then, and he would have got 556 points, so that's 56 bonus points racked up over the week. A lot of straight set wins, which puts him nicely at 13.9 points per credit, so very good value even at 40 credits. He might even be 36 credits by Monday, we shall see. Valentin Vacherot going very, very well in Monte Carlo right now. Again, 26% ownership, so a bit of a rank threat to those who don't own him. Didn't play last year, obviously, because he broke through in Shanghai in October, but he's in great form. Definitely a strong title contender. Looking elsewhere down the table, I've tried to include those who are a bit more affordable and those who are a little bit more premium. So you've got options. Lorenzo Musetti lost to Vacherot in Monte Carlo. He would be a bit of a punt, but clay is his best surface. Slightly concerned about the price, and I think the ownership is quite high. I think you can gain a lot more elsewhere. He wouldn't be top of my list, but Artifice is certainly very, very interesting. Played very, very well in Miami. Missed Monte Carlo this week, but a lot of people still went with him early. 23% ownership for a player who wasn't even playing in Tournament Week 1. So that shows you that the hype is there and the hype is real. People are believing in him. Only 6 credits as well, and he really could go deep in this tournament. I think he's a great option. Played amazingly here last year, 234 points. That's 39 points per credit. That's almost 3 times as much value as Carlos Alcaraz is bringing to your team. So he's definitely one that I would be prioritising to bring in. Thomas Martin Etcheverry played really well against Carlos Alcaraz today. Lots to like there. One of the best players on clay this season. I believe he's now 16-3, I think, for the season on clay, having won in Rio earlier this year. Took Carlos to 3 sets. Looks in very good form, looks confident. Highly owned again, but at just 6 credits, there's lots of upside. Alex de Minaur going well into the quarters of Monte Carlo, as is Felix Auger-Aliassime. They are on the pricier side, but they are delivering and could be a very good Jannik Sinner replacement on the premium side of things. And as a very cheap differential, Thomas Machuk made the last 16 of Monte Carlo, took Jannik Sinner to 3 sets today. A little bit up and down, serving a bit all over the place, but when he's on, and he only costs 4 credits. If he gets a good draw, he could go far at that price. Moving on to Munich now, and as I mentioned in my video on Monday, I think here's where you can gain the real upside, because most of you are going to own Carlos Alcaraz and you expect him to be the champion in Barcelona. So when it comes to bringing in new players this week, you really want to have the winner from both events. So you want to try and bring in who you think is going to win in Munich, so you can have the 500 points from Barcelona and the 500 points from Munich. So definitely pay close attention here to who I see as being the title contenders. Again, I group them in order of ownership and value to a degree. So you'll see here that João Fonseca and Francisco Cerundolo are template picks because of their such high ownership. I do think that I made a mistake not going with Fonseca. I could have picked him before Monte Carlo at 4 credits. He's now up to 5. I went with Stefanos Tsitsipas instead. Doesn't look great in hindsight. His ownership's only going to rise now. We're going to be getting closer to the Alcaraz territory than we are to the Sinner territory, who's now dropped to 44%. So I really think that we need to go early on Fonseca so we don't lose a lot of ground. Still involved in Monte Carlo into the quarterfinals. If he keeps going on there, then the points are going to keep going against us. And then the deeper he goes in Monte Carlo, the more enticing it's going to be to bring him in for Munich. And he could really be a genuine title contender now that he's reached his first Masters 1000 quarterfinal. Cerundolo at 8 credits I don't like as much. He beat Tsitsipas in the first round, but then lost in the round of 32. Still having a great season, very much on the rise and very good on this surface. But I think there are better value picks rather than the 8 credits, especially Juan Fonseca's 3 credits cheaper than him. Looking at the pivot picks in orange, it's hard to look past Alexander Zverev. He is the defending champion. He has won this event 3 times. He is still involved in Monte Carlo into the quarterfinals, and amazing record on clay. Going to be consistent all season long, number 3 in the world for a reason. And at 33 credits, you might think he's a natural Sinner replacement. He's only 14% owned, so he's going to be a good differential if you want to go there. And as you can see, the output last season was amazing. It was 560 points in the end, 16.9 points per credit. It's an interesting one here because he's not even really a safe pick. He's a very safe bet in that he's going to be the favourite for the title. But because he's only 14% owned, he's a massive differential. If he goes and makes the final again or wins it, it's going to be a huge points game for you. So he really is the safe pick. If you're looking for that Yannick Sinner replacement, you really couldn't do wrong by going with him. I really like Alexander Bublik as well. Low ownership, into the course of Monte Carlo for the first time, playing full of confidence. He'll be another serious contender here in Munich next week. And then on the differential side, I look more towards the value picks here. I have put Ben Shelton at the bottom because he is only 4% owned right now and he was last year's runner-up. I do worry he's a little bit undercooked coming into this event, but great memories from last year. 4% ownership is wild. It would be a massive rank game if he went and made a final again. But he does now cost 24 credits. So when you look at this list, I think Bublik's a safer pick for 10 credits less. I think obviously Fonseca is way below, 19 credits below that price. He would be very much a punt. If you're downgrading him, Sinner to him, I'd rather go for Zverev because you can also afford him and I think he's a safer option. But if you really want to have some fun with it, then he would be your best chance to really, really gain points next week. And then the super value picks, Bergs and Hurkacz, both into the last 16 in Monte Carlo, good for the ace and double fault bonus points, especially Hubert Hurkacz, who heading into the round of 16 stage, he was the top scorer, 164 points from the early rounds due to hitting 20 plus aces and only 1 double fault. So they're great picks on a budget. If you, let's say you can't afford to go to 5 credits for Fonseca, then Bergs and Hurkacz are great value there. So now that we've covered the players to watch when it comes to Barcelona and Munich, here are the players you should be looking to sell ahead of tournament week 2. Yannick Sinner, down from 51% to 44% ownership already. People have gone too early. He might increase in price, so you have to buy him back at a more expensive cost. So please don't sell him yet if you're planning on doing so. But he's not playing next week, so he's not in action. So my advice would be to sell and then bring him back in. That's what I'm going to do over the course of the weekend, once you've had the draws. Casper Ruud, as I said earlier, the injury really didn't look good. I really don't think he's going to be playing, so he's a definite sell in my eyes. Jakub Mensik, question mark here. I'd wait and see. He might be okay. Daniil Medvedev, not playing next week and in truly awful form, especially when it comes to clay. I couldn't believe that 15% of people had picked him. And the 6-love to Matteo Berrettini this week just exacerbated that situation. Minus 38 points, I think it was, which I don't even know will ever be beaten in the history of the game. Unfortunately, guys, if you went there, he is like the biggest absolute must-sell on this list this week. Alejandro Davidovich Fokina, disappointing that he is withdrawn from Barcelona. Gutted for him that he missed Monte Carlo after the great run last year. Looked like he might be back, which is why I think 8% of people picked him. But unfortunately, he will be missing Barcelona, so he is now a sell, because there'll be question marks over Madrid as well. And Francis TFO, not playing in Tournament Week 2, he has also withdrawn. 7% ownership. Went deep in Houston and missed Monte Carlo. Now he's chosen to skip next week as well. Probably back from Madrid, but really there's plenty of value elsewhere, especially at 8 credits. So with this in mind, possible switches to make. Jannik Sinner. Carlos Alcaraz is priority number 1. If you don't already own him, he should be your transfer. As I say, hold on though, because you might be able to do it in one move. If these two swap prices this week, then you'll be able to downgrade Sinner into Carlos Alcaraz. Even if they don't switch prices, I still think it'll be worth it to use both your free switches to make the move from Sinner to Alcaraz and downgrade someone else elsewhere. I just think he's that essential this week. We might be looking at 75% plus ownership, and most people will put the bonus ball on him as well. So if he goes and wins a tournament, it could be a brutal point swing. If you're like me and you own both, then I think that Zverev and Shelton are the natural premium picks at that price. You can downgrade into them nicely. As I mentioned earlier, Zverev is the more safe option and still a differential at only 14% ownership. Ben Shelton is the wildcard option. Not sure about his current form, but good memories here last year. And that 4% ownership just makes it so enticing to really go for it and push the boat out. When it comes to Casper Ruud, I think you go all the way down to João Fonseca here. I think he is a priority transfer this week. I was going to put him in for Sinner as well as a possible switch, but I do like the idea of going for a more premium player, given how raw and experienced Fonseca is. But with Ruud's price point, I think you go all the way down there at 5 credits to Fonseca. If you already own him, which over half of you do, then I think that Valentin, Vacherot and Artifice are the standout picks. Again, I've gone a lot cheaper than the 13 credits. This is the kind of moves that are going to help you then go from Sinner up to Alcaraz if they don't change price. Take Ruud down to Fonseca, Vacherot or Fils. With Vacherot and Fils, they're both in the form of their lives right now, especially Fils. I know he was injured for a long time, but he looks like he's picked up right where he left off. Has rested this week as well after his excerpts in Miami, so it's good that he's going to be fresh. Played really well in Barcelona last year. A lot of upside with these picks. I think that, they're only going to get better and their price is only going to continue to go up. So it's good to jump on that train early. Looking at more switches here, if you own Jakub Mensik, again, exactly the same here for Casper Ruud. You can move across to any of these players. They're at a perfect price point. Fonseca, Vacherot, Fils, all affordable. Vacherot might go up and be unaffordable if he makes the semi-finals in Monte Carlo, so do keep that in mind. He might not be a direct switch, but I think Mensik to Fonseca is a no-brainer. I've kept Fonseca and Vacherot in here, but I bought in Alexander Bublik because you can afford to move to him at 14 credits, whereas you couldn't afford to do that with Ruud or Mensik. And I think he's got a low enough ownership where I think there's a lot of upside. He could win the tournament next week. It might not be Zverev or Shelton. I think Bublik would be my second favourite for the title. He had the best clay court season of his career last year. Going to get back into the top 10 again. Really excited to see him play Carlos Alcaraz tomorrow in the Monte Carlo quarterfinals. Let's see how he does there, but I think he could be a real contender next week. And I think he's at a great price point and a great ownership percentage. CP my top choice to replace Medvedev. So just to recap key takeaways as we looked ahead to Tournament Week 2. The draws for Barcelona and Munich take place on Saturday, that's April the 11th. Don't make your switches before then. I'll be doing another video on Saturday looking at withdrawals in detail to help us narrow down the pool of players to target that I've shown you today. Alcaraz is close to being essential. If you don't have him, I really think you should go and get him. And the best way to do that would be to do Sinner to Alcaraz and then downgrade someone to Fonseca if their prices don't switch. If they switch, it's a natural downgrade. In my view, a well-constructed team will have at least 3 of these 9 players on screen right now. How I came to this conclusion is looking at ownership and their value, their price points and their form. So I think that most squads are going to have at least 3 of these players. I have 3 myself right now in the form of Alcaraz, Echeverri and Lehechka. But Fonseca and Artifice and Bublik are very much on my radar, especially Fonseca and Fils at their price points. So I think I'll be on at least 4 come the deadline, but we shall see. If you're torn between 2 players, again, wait for the draws first of all, but if you're still torn, target players who are playing in Munich versus Barcelona, because there's more of a chance then that you're picking the actual tournament winner, assuming that Alcaraz are going to get it done in Barcelona. And finally, keep an eye on those injuries if you do own Casper Ruud and /or Jakub Mensik. So that wraps up the early preview for Tournament Week 2, looking ahead to Barcelona and Munich. As I said, I'll be back on Saturday to do another video looking at the draws in more detail, but definitely please go and join the conversation. Join our subreddit r/ATP Fantasy. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel, it really helps out a lot. Follow us on socials as well, at Expected Aces. And as I sign off, just thought I'd share how I'm getting on so far. So round of 16 has been completed today and I am on 1,100 points. A very nice round number there. Still Jannik Sinner and Alcaraz in action for me in the quarterfinals. Sinner with the bonus ball. Both on the same amount of points right now, would you believe? 220 points each. Disappointment for Lehechka, but he served really well, got a lot of ace bonus points. Actually very happy to have him. He only cost me 5 credits anyway, and he looked really good against Alcaraz today. Berrettini was a hero for me, getting the upset of Daniel Medvedev. Wasn't expecting much against Fonseca, so that's fine. And Marin Cilic did what he had to do for me at 3 credits. He won his first match, which was important. It was all going to be upside from there. I got my alternate benching decisions correct. All my higher scoring players were actually in my team, which was great. Slightly regretting not going for Fonseca instead of Tsitsipas. Hopefully he gets a nice draw in Munich. He was the one change I made from my team selection video last week. At the time I had Alexei Popyrin in my team rather than Tsitsipas. That move still worked out really well because Popyrin lost first round anyway, and I would have played him and benched Berrettini. So I actually would have lost nearly 130 points had I done that. So very happy to have made that last minute move and put Berrettini in the starting 6. But we'll see how the final few days go. Fingers crossed Jannik Sinner is going to win the title and go big for me on the bonus ball. That's all for now. Thank you for watching. I'll speak to you all again very soon.